Live. Elisha, tell me something new since the last time we went live.
Something new. Well, I think we could announce that we're going to Austin next week. I'm gonna see you, Johnny, in person. So we're hoping to see if there's any like a format of us doing live together in person. So kind of excited about that next week.
I agree. I think that'll be really cool just to see if there's a new format or style that we can do that. Maybe we'll kind of change up the format just a little bit. Um,
Yeah,
See if that
yeah, we can
makes it a little bit
do
better.
more discussion format, like our prediction for the next semi year of the what's coming in the emerging tech industry. That could be interesting to discuss, or what we expect to see in 2023. So yeah.
I like that. I do think that there's quite a lot coming, and it would be pretty interesting to cover some of that together and get thoughts and perspectives on that. Because especially as it relates to the XR space, I think there's a lot we could probably cover there. Don't you think?
Yeah, I'm really interested in the XR space. Like I really want to get my hands on in the AR glasses in any form or shape. I know there are a lot that's announced and coming too, but I think global shortage on chips and everything are, I'm pretty sure, making it more difficult to do. And oh, we got to update that to, oh, interesting. I see episode 8, but it should be episode. Ah, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
Cool.
we are currently on
Yeah.
episode 9. Um, I think it's yeah, I think the graphic shows that. But yeah, so that I think that'll be good. If there's a format that any of the viewers are interested in seeing, that might be outside of the standard format of covering some news, and some showcase stuff and things like that. Please let us know. I mean, we're definitely interested in new formats and styles, especially as it relates to things that you are interested in as a viewer. So let us know.
Yeah, and we would welcome
Um,
all the comments and questions during the live show, and we'll just pause and answer the question if you guys have anything. So we'll welcome all that interactions. That'll be fun.
yeah. Is there
And
something in particular today that you're excited to cover? I know we're covering a few different pieces of news and content. So
yeah, I think it will be interesting to go over Nick Clegg's take on the making the metaverse. And I thought it's very interesting because there are a lot that we have already be covering. So it's kind of nice, like summary of like, okay, I think what we're thinking about how the metaverse is going is kind of in alignment with some other people in the middle of like creating it, is thinking in a similar way. And I think that's a great uh, feel. Also, I think our understanding on the metaverse is, I think, very similar. And I think industry as a whole is still figuring it out, but I think we have some common theme that we're starting to agree on. So that's interesting to cover.
yeah, I'm interested in covering that. I know you did a deep dive on that, so I think that'll be good to kind of cover some of that content. It's
Yeah,
just
it's a very
interesting.
long article, so if people want to read, they can read, but it probably takes like 30 minutes to an hour if you read full. Yeah.
Oh wow, wow. Yeah. So you're gonna give us the Cliff Notes version today.
Yeah, much shorter version. Especially if you have been watching our live shows. I think a lot of the ideas that he shares are like, yeah, we already kind of talked about that before, kind of thing. So there are some note that I'll highlight, but a lot of the things, if you follow our live shows, like nothing would sound necessarily new. Everything would sound like, oh yeah, Johnny and Elisha have talked about that in the past, type of story.
So it kind of the same themes slightly and kind of sentiment and perspective maybe.
Mhm.
Great, great. Alrighty. Yeah, I'm gonna put this on the screen here, Elisha, just so this actually comes from us If you are joining, I think that's joining today should be joining on YouTube. You'll notice that we're not live on LinkedIn, we're not live on Twitter, but we do welcome your feedback and participation, like Elisha said earlier, today. So chat any questions. We actually do get that to our kind of our live stream software, and it kind of gives us a sense for what your thoughts are, perspectives, and questions. And we'd love to be interrupted with a question here or there if you have any. So with that, we can talk about a little bit about what we are covering today in episode 9 of our Fresh Labs show. So welcome. We are Johnny Rodriguez, Director, Strategic Innovation Director here at Fresh. Here with Fresh Consulting, we run Fresh Labs. With me is our co-host, Elisha Terada, who is our Technical Innovation Director. We have very similar titles. Elisha is able to go a little bit deeper on the technical side and brings very unique perspectives on a lot of the stuff that we cover from a content perspective, but also as we start building, he's often the one that's in the behind the scenes actually executing on a lot of that. And our Fresh Labs live show is something we do every week at 12 p.m. Pacific. We cover and love sharing and talking about all things emerging tech in the metaverse, as we talked about, Web3, kind of blockchain, XR, which is a lot of the augmented and virtual reality, AI, ML, and quite a lot more. So we're excited to jump in today to cover some different topics. Elisha gave us some previews of some of that. And we can kind of put up here on the screen some of what we're covering. We'll have some lightning news topics today. I'll be covering something around a presidential campaign, not in the US, that is being run inside of the metaverse in Somnium Space. And then Elisha will be covering Nick Clegg, an executive from Meta, and a recent kind of what do you want to call it? I was going to call it a manifesto, but no, it's not. It's a
Or like an
document.
essay. I think people say
An
essay.
essay, yeah.
Yeah, essay. Yeah.
A 8,000 word essay on the metaverse, which is an interesting perspective from an executive for Meta. And then we'll go into some of the showcase, some things that we're actually building and working on, and showcasing some of that with you all today. So yeah, let's jump into it, Elisha.
Cool.
Why don't you cover the PlayStation, the PSVR 2?
Yes. So this is supposedly a leaked image of the actual hardware. I think people are very eager to start uncovering, like, when is this PSVR 2 covering? Like, oh wait, is this the actual prototype in the wild? It's slated to be most likely coming out in 2023 because of all the things going on in the world delaying launch of everything. I think PSVR 2 is also going to be in the group that is going to be released next year. And the reason I wanted to bring this up, not necessarily because this leak is super interesting, this could be a real leak or fake leak. Apparently it was taken down, so it kind of adds a little bit of credibility as far as the leak goes. But I actually did want to show our list of the headsets that we actually track and cover. And here you see the Cambria on the top right, but we will be at the PSVR 2. Oh, actually, yeah, in the left bottom we have PlayStation VR, but now we're talking about PlayStation VR 2 that's coming up in the future. And I thought it would be fun to do this exercise of where do we see PlayStation VR 2 fitting into the existing set of VR headsets. And I did create this quadrant for fun where we can kind of get our heads around on, okay, there's so many devices out there, but like there are just too many. And we don't, sometimes the ones that you never heard of, like you don't even know how they fit into the picture. So in the quadrant I have on the left side, it's a specialized use case of the headset. And on the right side, I have a general purpose use case. And at the bottom of the quadrant, you see the consumer-oriented device. And then on the top right, you see the commercial oriented devices. And I kind of started to plot existing devices and see how. For example, the Meta Quest, I would say, is consumer oriented, and it's a general purpose. And I'll lightly touch on this later when we cover the essay by Nick Clegg. But one of Meta's goal with the VR headset is that they have a line of headset that is affordable to make sure that a lot of people could get hands-on. A lot of the VR headsets that came out, especially early in the time, including HTC Vive Pro series, are like more than $1,000. That's like, okay, that's really expensive. Not many people can get hands-on. But Meta believes that, well, this technology needs to be accessible to create more diverse and equal opportunity world in the metaverse, so that many people can contribute to the creation of the metaverse, regardless of their financial situation. So they're trying to make it reasonable, right? So at the consumer end and general purpose end, I say Meta Quest 2 is one of the key player in mass adoption area. And if you go up to the top in the Meta Cambria, Meta has made it really clear that the Cambria is mostly going to be for like a commercial. It is going to be released for like a developers only initially, and I don't know if this is going to become more available to the consumer level with price going down. But I think the initial speculation is that this is going more towards still general purpose, but more towards commercial audience, at least initially.
I didn't actually
And
know
I
that,
think,
Alexis.
yeah, I think Project Cambria is supposed to be more like a higher end grade, so the price is going higher. And I think they said it's first going to be for developers to be uh, like using it, and then I think creating
Yeah, yeah.
programs for it. Yeah, and it might change over time, but I think that's what I read first. And I'll say that anything following in the quadrant is everything that has to do with the leading innovation. Like, how do you get other companies involved and try that the latest, the XR, AR, and the VR technology, and find interesting use case, right? And they are coming from the same company, so you can see how where Meta is playing in the general purpose field. Whereas there
Hmm.
is a specialized and commercial field. I don't know if you heard of this one, BR Engineers X-Tile 3. This is designed for the Air Force simulation use case. So this is
Hmm.
where you probably never see this in a while unless you work for Air Force. So this is clearly targeted towards the pilots to be simulating whatever they need to be trained on, and it's definitely in the commercial use case, right? And I'll say anything following in the category is generally about focused on problem solving. Like, this is like, okay, we need to solve this specific problem, and that's why it's gonna cost probably a little bit. It's not going to be mass produced, and it's going to solve specific specialized problems like Air Force. And HTC Vive, I think it's more in the specialized of gaming, but I think it's expensive. It's like 200. That it's not quite like a consumer friendly, but maybe not quite like, oh, this is for commercial use case. And to wrap it up, I think PlayStation VR 2, I think, fall into the specialized and consumer category, where it is more like a vertical integration or upsell use case where, like, oh, you have a PS5. Okay, well, we can also give you the VR headset to go along with it. So it makes sense to be used together in a specialized use case for gaming specific. And I'm pretty sure they have some utility applications within PlayStation, but I think you can clearly say like it is more special use case. So I think every time we hear about VR headsets, I think we're gonna touch on like, where does this fit into the quadrant? And I might look at this in different ways as well.
I like
That's it.
this. Yeah, this is great. I'd love to see this with AR headsets as well. We can do something similar. It's interesting your perspective on the PSVR V2 as well. Just thinking about it being specialized because it does require a PS5 and it is
Mhm,
more gaming. And I'm sure there, like you said,
mhm.
there's other utility, but it is more specific to like doing gaming really well with high end graphics. You know, there's a lot of specs on that one that have already been shared and they're pretty high end. So it's going to be one of the most high end VR headsets actually for consumers, but it will be specialized because there's that dependency. Cool.
Yep. Cool.
Great. So let's jump now to the kind of next section here on some other news. It's kind of an interesting thing here. So, two pieces of news. I mean, really, what I wanted to share here was Artifact. So, Artifact, RTFKT is pronounced Artifact. I found that out later.
We're
They
just saying
are a
artifact.
agency.
Okay.
Artifact. Interesting way to spell that. It's pretty creative. But they are an agency, like a studio that created. They actually did some NFT. They've done quite a lot with NFTs, and they did an NFT drop with shoes. And this was mid last year, 2021. And when they did the drop, they sold, I think it was 6,000 shoes in 6 minutes, and it generated millions of dollars. Right, so it was like this really successful drop.
Wow.
Um, and they've done a lot of really creative things. They also are the creators of Clone X. It's one of the most popular PFP, like avatar based, where there's a person or a being in it. They're one of the most popular ones. You've probably heard of Bored Ape Yacht
I,
Club, and you've probably heard of maybe a few others. Clone X is one of those that it's in that probably that top 10 list of most well known kind of NFTs. Artifact was acquired by Nike in December. And so when we say Artifact, what we're really saying is Nike. But Artifact actually just this week announced that they were giving out commercial rights. So if you're an NFT holder for if you're a collector of one of their NFTs for a Clone X, right, you're getting a unique NFT, and they're giving you commercial rights now. Number one, and number two is they're giving you access to the 3D files. This isn't the first time we've seen this with PFP avatars. There's quite a lot. I actually own a few of them, Elisha. I think we've talked about other NFTs that I own and others that other people own, and we talked about the utility tied to avatars and how, hey, you can like go and download it. Well, they did this for CloneX officially this week, and on the right here where it says CloneX's expectations. Let's see if I can even play. Oh, there we go. The one here at the bottom is telling you about their expectations. So, hey, now that we've given you 3D access, we're expecting a new generations of creators to emerge. We're going to see VTubers, people that are using their avatars as themselves to represent a character, maybe video game demos. A few live streams ago, Elisha, we talked about Seth Green and how he lost the rights to his Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT. Do you remember that? And
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
he ended up having to pay quite a lot of money to get that back. So we're seeing the commercial use of NFTs in a lot of places, which takes me to the news around Snoop Dogg and Eminem. These are two rappers, musicians that came under Dr. Dre, if you know Dr. Dre. So they've known each other for a really long time. They had a little bit of a falling out, and recently they actually got together and made a new music video. Well, I guess a new song. And as part of that song, they actually partnered with Gary V, who Elisha, who does a lot with NFTs. And they partnered with his media company to create the music video on the top right here. This is just a small clip. There's a lot in this video that is not safe for work. So I only grabbed a small clip here so you get a sense for some of the graphical style. But they actually leveraged Bored Ape Yacht Club NFTs because there's commercial rights when you own those NFTs. They actually were able to leverage those in different animation styles. So you can see Eminem here slightly snap between going a real video of Eminem to the kind of the NFT version of him. And so we're seeing, like with Seth Green, there's a TV show being produced. You have Snoop Dogg and Eminem using the NFT avatars for music videos. We're seeing them on billboards nowadays. And so Clone X, along with anybody else that owns PFP kind of avatar based NFTs, we're going to continue to see more and more of that usage for NFTs.
If you lose the NFT or if you sell it, what happens to the music video itself, the rights?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't actually know the details. I would imagine that the commercial rights follow the owner of the NFT. But I don't know how it works in retrospect. I think that it might be like during the ownership process, you might have owned it during the period of time that it was created. But I don't know how that works,
Yeah,
especially in
that'll be
perpetuity in
interesting.
the future.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
that'll
the
be
assumption is
interesting
that
to
they're
know.
probably
Yeah,
not gonna sell those, or they might be worth more money in the future when they do sell them. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's
That's
interesting.
interesting question. Yeah,
So on the bottom here, the two little video thumbnails, and I don't think we can really see those there, but part of their release of these NFTs, like, hey, Clone X NFT holders, like, hey, now you have 3D files. Here's how you go download it. They actually dropped like, hey, here's how you go download it. On the bottom left, you see how to pose and make renders with your NFT with your Clone X. So they show you in Maya how to go and position your Clone X to do a certain position. On the right, they show you how to take your NFT and put it into a Snapchat filter. Like, hey, here's how you can download the 3D file and then go into Lens Studio, the software used from Snapchat to create filters. And here's how you can go create that for yourself. And so there's a lot of these like videos showcasing how you can go and do some of that stuff with your NFT. So definitely an interesting trend. This is something we've talked about for a really long time, Elisha, and we're seeing. I think right now is where we're seeing kind of maybe the peak, or starting to see the peak of using NFTs for commercial use cases. For things like that. So definitely an interesting piece of news as we talk about things that happened this week.
yeah. I was actually googling the commercial rights page on the article, and they do say that it has to be legally obtained. So if someone steals it, like at the Bored Ape Club NFT,
They
they
don't get the
can't claim
rights.
copyright. They don't get the commercial right. They have to obtain it um, legally. And I haven't got to any part they talk about like, okay, what happens if you sell it, type of thing. But yeah, so it makes sense. There's some protection for the owner, so that like maybe if you lose it because someone steals it, like you don't have to buy it back with millions of dollars because I think people will try
Yeah,
to steal it from you, right, on the internet. So
definitely. Yeah, definitely something that could happen. That's good. I'm glad you looked that up. So yeah, that kind of covers, I think, the portion we had today on the lightning news. As we jump into the top news, I'll remind those that are watching either live or watching after the fact that this is on YouTube, and we do have the Fresh Labs YouTube channel. So um, if you would like to follow along and see some of the future content that we do from a live stream perspective or other types of video, please subscribe. You know, it does help. It does help us kind of reach new people and help the YouTube algorithm to get in front of more people. So definitely follow there. We also do have some other accounts here at the bottom. You can see some of mine and Elisha's here for just at the bottom of here on the feed here for Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, where we cover a lot of this similar content, but maybe more bite-sized or more concise kind of graphics and insights and things like that. So definitely give us a follow if you're interested in that kind of content. We also do have a LinkedIn page, a showcase page that's under Fresh Labs. If you looked at LinkedIn, or if you go to our Fresh Consulting page, you can see that it's there connected as well. But this is a place where we also post our content in a kind of consolidated place. Great. All right. And with that, let's jump into the first piece of news here, or I guess an article in this case. Elisha, tell us about Nick Clegg.
yes, so Nick Clegg, I actually didn't know who Nick Clegg was, but there was an article that came out and people are talking about it and like, who's Nick Clegg? And I looked it up. So Nick Clegg, I thought he was like, oh, just a random person in tech space. Actually, no, he's a British media executive and former deputy prime minister of the United Kingdom. So he was a politician, and that was between, I think, 2007 to 2015. Oh, wait, no, that's not the length. 2010 to 2015, he was the former deputy prime minister. And now he works at Meta. He has been working at, or formerly Facebook, since 2018. So he's been around the block for 5 years now. And right now, he is the president of global affairs. And I thought that was very interesting move that Facebook made back in the 2018, hiring the deputy prime minister. That's I think it makes sense, right? The world is going global, and you can't decide everything in this one state in the United States and then pretend like that's gonna work well globally, right? You kind of want someone who has the global mindset on your team, actually, with a lot of political experience to be assisting the future of where the meta is headed. And that's exactly almost how his essay plays out in this 30-minute long reading that he posted on Medium, where Nick Clegg basically walk you through the evolution of the internet and how we arrived at metaverse and how we are still defining what the metaverse means. And before I continue like uncovering some of the interesting key points, Johnny, do you have any reactions to Nick Clegg? I don't know. Did you know about Nick Clegg before
I saw
in
his
the
title,
past?
but I didn't know the connection to the deputy prime minister part of it. Um, I'm imagining that he probably has a global affairs experience prior to that, but also being a deputy prime minister, there's elements of global affairs that he has to handle. So it kind of feels like, definitely qualified and all of that. That's awesome. But interesting
Uh,
there. I think what I'm most interested on is that he is putting out an article on Medium, right, which is where this was posted,
mhm.
where
Yeah.
obviously you're going to cover the content on it, but he's not just representing his opinions as Nick Clegg, but also as Nick Clegg, the president of global affairs. So I'm interested in like what things kind of stood out to you from that, but also getting his perspectives given his background.
Yeah, that was also interesting play as well, because if it was on the Meta website, maybe people think it's the PR, or people know like, oh, it must be highly edited by editors before it's being published. I think what he did by posting on Medium was kind of nice, more human ways that at least I feel like, oh, he's just a regular human, regular blog writer who just posts his opinion on, you know, third party blogging platform, right? He could have his own platform, or he could post it on some Meta owned property platform. But he proceeded to post on the Medium, which is interesting play, I think, that he's playing here. So just going through some of the initial outline, how he starts out. He talks about how Facebook started 18 years ago and how we all started just typing text on websites. Like I used to run a website with the BBS where people can just chat, hit save, you refresh the page, and you can hope to see that you don't know when you get a reply, right? So you would go back to the website many times and like refresh, refresh, refresh. And then we got phones and we got the cameras with the phone, and internet got baked into the mobile phone. So now we're carrying internet with us instead of going to my machine. And the connection gets faster and faster, right? So you move from the modem dial up where like we used to watch videos on real-time network and you would just wait for the video to buffer. It got faster. So now you can just watch the videos on the phone. And if you look at platforms like Instagram that started with the static photo images, now we are watching the stories or the TikTok videos. It's mainly like, oh, entertainment is now happening in the video format thanks to the speed increase in a lot of the countries out there with the smartphones. So it's outlining how you move from desktop to mobile, from text to photos to video, and the progression basically is natural that it is now going into the 3D immersive experience where it is even more richer that we can see the presence of ourselves. So instead of me watching Johnny's TikTok video on the other end, right, pre-recorded, I can actually see Johnny through Metaverse or through the avatars that I can see Johnny like moving around, just like how we're doing it right now. But even more so in the presence where I can feel Johnny, like maybe he's breathing right next to my ear because like, I can see Johnny next to me in the in the workroom, in the New Horizon workroom, the Horizon space, right? And that's different. And I was reading another article that's separate from this one that I thought had really good point about feeling the presence, where in a meeting with the Zoom or Hangout where you see like 12 people on the screen, right? When I speak, I know everyone is hearing me talking at the same amount of volume. But in a real life meeting room, I can actually talk to just someone sitting next to me and whisper, like, hey, like, do we need to do something about this document? And I know that only this person can hear during the meeting. At the same time, that maybe this person can also hear like a presenter talking, like maybe Jeff, our CEO, is presenting something, and I'm like chit chatting with someone on the side, like maybe half listening. That's possible in the presence, in the reality, and in the metaverse environment where the volume of the speaker and the listener is based on the proximity between the two people. So the presence adds another level of richness. And he's basically then leading into say, okay, what's take away with this like story of the progression of the internet? Well, it's ultimately about finding ways to utilize the benefits of the online world and how to enrich our life and not replacing them. So he has the clear message there that metaverse is probably not, in his mind, going to where the place of Ready Player One. I don't know if anybody watched the movie. I only recently watched a few months ago, and I encourage you to watch it. In Ready Player One, the depiction is that we are starting to escape reality and escape into this virtual world that is way better than reality. And some would even today say, outside of the movie context, that hey, the reality might become something of a privilege. Maybe only rich people can start to own a house. Maybe the poor people have worse life in reality, so they are going to start to escape into the virtual world. But what Nick is saying, well, it's more about enriching our life experience. It's not about replacing them because we want to escape into the world. And he goes on to say, okay, what are requirements to get to the mass adoption? Because people are still afraid, people are still questioning, is this metaverse the scary thing they're going to get sucked into? And another thing that is unhealthy, right? We talk about balance in the tech and how we shouldn't spend too much of our time in our phone. Is metaverse just going to be like additional thing that you're going to be spending your time on? And he just goes on to say what it means to build a safe place. And companies like Meta is basically saying that they're committed to making metaverse the safe place, and also not going to make it where Meta is the one that's owning the metaverse. The Meta is going to be cooperating with the rest of the other metaverses out there. So he kind of talks about in his essay where things are going, but also he's touching on to make sure, hey, Meta is doing this to improve, Meta is doing this to ensure. So there's some messaging built into what Meta is doing in regards to a lot of questions that people have. And I want to pause here, Johnny, because I kind of talked quite a bit in the intro part of his essay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I like what he said about I mean, there's a few things. You were talking about presence. So he covered a lot there, it seems like, and how that's important. It does seem like there are metaverse environments do that better than others. I don't know if we're quite at the let me look at you and whisper, but we are at the proximity based audio, where as you get closer, you hear more volume. As you go away, you hear less volume. You might have private conversations that way. So I'm actually interested to see how that evolves to what you just mentioned, where we might be in the same group of people and then I can like lean over and look at you. And because I'm looking at you, I might be able to have a more private conversation. So that was definitely an interesting part. I also really like um, I also really like the part you said around that this isn't like an escape from
Mhm.
reality. I do think that that's what Ready Player One showcases. So it's good to hear that, you know, an executive at Meta saying, "Hey, we're not trying to get to this fully immersive virtual world is better than the physical world kind of thing." I think that's the biggest worry. As I post a lot on TikTok, there's quite a lot of feedback cycles of hearing what people's feedback, uh, hearing the feedback that people have on certain things around the metaverse, and there's a lot of concerns around it becoming fully immersive and then better than the physical world, and that it'll become bad for our mental health, you know, that will turn into like the if you've ever seen the movie Wall-E, where everyone eventually goes and gets overweight and, you know, doesn't get out of these chairs, you know. So there's a lot of worry of like mental health, physical health. So it's great to hear an executive from Meta saying, "We're not aiming to do that. We're aiming for it to be something that adds and enhances what you have in the real world." So those are the things that stood out to me so far on that. That's great.
Yeah. And yeah, we can move on to the next section where on the slide you see the 3 points that he touches on. And I want to cover just briefly on each one. So he's saying there are three key factors that will make interactions in metaverse feel more like those we have in our daily lives. So just like what we talk about with the presence, what matters. And the first part he talks about is ephemerality. It's a little bit hard to ephemerality. So in the physical world, like we talk to each other and nothing is recorded. You can't repeat. So you have to ask, hey, sorry, what did you say again? Can you repeat that again? Or maybe like you couldn't hear quite well, right? So like you would get closer to the person, just like in the metaverse world where you get closer in the avatar. And in contrast, he's saying like the social media or any previous internet worlds, like you can read a text at any time, any day, right? Like you receive text message and you can read it, but you don't have to respond because there is expectation that well you can get to it eventually, but you know you don't have to respond right now. Whereas in reality, it's a little bit weird if you talk to me, ask me something, and I just sit for 5 hours and then respond later, right? And also,
Mhm.
maybe you can delete the message, right? Like, oops, I didn't mean to send that. Or like, well, now that I think about it, I probably shouldn't have sent that. You can delete it or edit it. So the main difference with the ephemerality is that you have to consume at that point in time. And most likely you also have to respond to what's being said at the time. There's no editing. There's no, deleting, you can't take that back. And he does actually talk about what it means for the ephemeral content to be um, kind of like gated or not gated, but maybe policed. For example, in the meta world, like people are a little bit more like speaking out of their mind. We jumped into some of the worlds and they would say things that's maybe not safe for work, so we didn't record or we couldn't publish the recording of it. And to that, he actually mentions it's kind of like going to the bar, and maybe some people get drunk and start to like, loosen up and start to say things without the filter, right? And in that moment, there is no like bartender or the police like actively listening to see if you said something and then like slap you every time you say something bad, right? It's gonna go. And that's why, of course, there's some safety measure built in to say, like, oh, well, you got to be over 21 years old before you are even allowed in the bar. But what if you're already in the bar and there are some, you know, the content that's not quite appropriate to hear? In the real world, bartender might say, "Hey, like you gotta chill, you gotta drink water, you gotta like, clear your minds," or like, we don't tolerate the behavior. You deal with that conflicts a little bit more naturally, and that's what he thinks would happen in the metaverse world as well, where it's the community effort to say, "Hey, there's no policing act of like, you know, monitoring what you're saying," and they make it clear the meta is not streaming the recording of what you're saying to the server, but they have a measurement to say, hey, that was abusive content. or something to be said, so that they can actually let user record that segment, so that they can report that as a recorded segment, but it's not streaming to the meta server. Any comments on that ephemerality part, Johnny?
It does make a lot of sense. I do think that people want to be. Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot. I actually, out of the three that, as I've scanned this a little bit, of the three, this one's the one I hadn't really thought about. Um, it does make me feel like, we've seen a lot of recent claims and some issues that have to do with people being a little too close or doing inappropriate things with other people in a as virtual avatars, right? And so there is that element of like, well, we want some policing, but we don't want interesting balance. And I think that it'll be challenging to approach that. And I know each environment might have different rules and regulations and things around that. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that evolves over time. But it does make sense that we will need that in the same way that we do in a physical world.
Yeah, I think his essay does pretty good job with like how he ties it to the real world, so that even I was like, oh yeah, that bar example is such a good example on how I think about the ephemerality. And just quickly on the other parts, embodiment, just like our virtual rich interactions versus just typing on the keyboard really fast to respond on Reddit forum. And immersion, right? It just with especially with the VR headset, like we feel like we're there and we forget about like looking at different screens where we context switch between reality and the virtual world. Like we're like, okay, we're immersive. So he thinks that's some of the key three factors. And in the next slide, I will just lightly touch on the building blocks examples that he talks about, Johnny. There's a chart in the essay. He also works touches on this one where, hey, like you can think of building the metaverse as like building on top of each other, where at the foundation you need hardware such as AR, XR, VR devices like a Meta Quest, and also protocols to make sure there is some ways we agreed of transmitting data between the worlds, like NFT, and how that it's interoperable. And then it goes into, okay, now it's the platforms, networks such as Meta's rich ecosystem of applications and developers and consumers. And there's some networks that connects to the other worlds. And then in the last, like the experience that kind of close off really helps the users feel immersed or feel the embodiment and feel the presence of each other. So yeah, it's really long, but I think it is at least worth reading like a first half of the essay where it kind of describes like here's how we arrived to where we are and here's where we're headed. And after that, it gets a little bit technical sometimes and maybe a little bit more difficult to read, but I think overall this is a really great essay.
Wow, great. Yeah, I'm actually really interested in like diving in a little bit deeper just to kind of get a better sense for some of this because yeah, like I said, there's already a few things in here that I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Um, and I am definitely curious to see what translates from what's the vision to what actually gets done. And I'm hoping that there's a not a huge gap with that.
Yeah.
Great, cool article. That's great. I appreciate all the insights on that. All right, let's cover this next article. I guess this next piece of news. The Czech Republic presidential candidate, his name is Karel Janeček, has selected Somnium Space to run their presidential campaign. Let me get your initial knee-jerk reactions on that, Elisha.
Yeah, this is the I guess in some ways connect to the last part, right? In Japan, I used to see politicians come to my town in the car. I don't know if you've seen those Asian, typical Asian politicians, around the time of election, right? They'll be on the car and they'll be standing on top of the car and then they'll be speaking to people. That's like a presence, right? I feel closer to you. You're not just a picture on the wall to vote for. So in some ways, it kind of does the same thing, but at the global scale in the metaverse world.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, it's interesting, and I wanted to cover it. There isn't a lot of details on this quite yet. There was a tweet, as you see on the bottom left, from Somnium Space saying, "Hey, we're extremely excited to announce that Karel Janeček has officially partnered with Somnium Space as a metaverse to officially run his 2023 Czech presidential campaign. Stay tuned for more announcements." We haven't seen the more announcements part yet, but I wanted to cover it because I think it's interesting to think about. We've seen brands, we've seen companies, usually in the large, well-known brands and maybe the medium-sized business space, starting to leverage or having leveraged the metaverse for different experiences. We've seen Samsung on the 837X kind of experience in Decentraland. We covered that in one of our videos. We've seen I know I've recently jumped into the JP Morgan Chase experience. Right now, they're doing like a book of the summer and they kind of recommend different books. We've seen space, I think, in Somnium Space around Tesla and then maybe some other NBA Hall of Fame, And so there's quite a lot of brands that are in there. But what I hadn't seen quite yet is an individual, specifically a presidential candidate from a country like this that's running their campaign in the metaverse. So it's definitely an interesting
Yeah.
perspective.
I wonder if Nick Clegg would have run himself for his campaign before he became the deputy prime
Oh,
minister.
interesting. Interesting. I would predict that we will see as these environments, these metaverse environments become more and more mainstream and more widely adopted, we're going to see more and more political campaigns being run in these environments. It might be rentals of billboards, it might be rentals of environments to showcase or meet and greets potentially. Um, so we don't have a lot of the details, but let me tell you the few things we do know. So Karel Janeček, he's a 48-year-old Czech mathematician, entrepreneur. Um, he got his PhD in Pennsylvania in the U.S. in mathematics. And his aim in joining Somnium Space as a place to run his campaign, he says, is to tap into, quote, a young generation of voters from the Czech Republic. So he's trying to reach a younger demographic. And then just for those that don't know what Somnium Space is, Elisha and I have actually covered and did a first impressions video where I showed Elisha around and we drove cars, NFT cars, and went and visited some environments and traveled throughout this environment, teleported between areas. It was a pretty fun experience. Somnium Space is essentially a metaverse environment or a VR world. It's a VR world first on the Ethereum blockchain where players can buy land. It's one of those places where you can do that. Build or import NFTs like cars, your own avatars, wearable clothing. You can explore. It's a map that everyone experiences. You can go travel, and you do have to travel, by foot for most places. So you're exploring, or you could trade things, and you can join. We've joined. They do have a web version. They have a PC app, but to actually get the full-fledged experience, you have to have either a more powerful VR headset, or you have to have a Quest 2 that has the PC VR kind of cable to kind of plug into your computer and run the experience. So it's not the most accessible metaverse environment yet. They do have a standalone version for the Quest that's in beta that we've played with a little bit, and more coming soon. But it begs a few questions to me, Elisha. I do think it's interesting. I think it's very innovative. But I have some questions that I kind of wanted to pose as we kind of chat through this just a little bit. Maybe not all of these questions, but why do you think it makes sense for him to run a campaign in the metaverse? He said he wants to reach a younger demographic. Do you think that that's a good enough reason, or do you think there are other reasons outside of that make sense for that to be done inside of the metaverse?
I think the PR is great as well by like officially partnering with the Somnium Space. That almost made it look like he is somewhat like more credible than
Mm.
maybe otherwise. Like, oh, like he it's good enough to like partner with the tech company, and obviously he's the only Czech uh candidate that I know now because he's the only one I see on the news, right? So I
And
think
we're covering it in
great
the US.
PR. Yeah, great PR, great campaign. And
Yeah.
this partnership, I think, is very interesting. What if I get partnered with the Roblox as official, like, election running on the platform? That's like, whoa, that's a huge impact. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of what my thought process was as well. I think it's pretty innovative, right? To say like, hey, we need out of the box thinking for our presidential, our new president, right? And it's like this thought of like, hey, well, look at what this presidential candidate's doing. He's jumping in a very immersive virtual environment, like a metaverse environment where he's going and campaigning. Like it becomes maybe to the millennials, it might reach younger voters. It actually might reach younger voters to hear it, and it does bring more hype. So it was just interesting to think about. To be clear, he's not running his entire campaign in the metaverse. He has an actual campaign where he's hitting locations and he's speaking at these events, but he's also doing a campaign inside of Somnium Space. So it's interesting. I'll jump a few of these. Knowing that Somnium Space is probably one of the most advanced, uh, maybe the closest to hyperrealism that we've seen so far as it relates to kind of fully immersive metaverse environments. It's a great environment, but as you and I know, Elisha, it was kind of hard. The entry point to get into Somnium Space is quite hard. It's quite inaccessible today still. So I was curious on why he picked Somnium Space over other platforms, and I wanted
I'm
to see if you
I'm
had any quick
thinking, yeah, I
thoughts on that.
wonder, there may be some policy around it. It could be either policy on the platform itself, like maybe the Roblox, for example, wanted more neutral space, right? Where they would not allow certain types of campaign or content, or they wouldn't care to partner with you officially. It's like, oh, you can do whatever you want, but we're not gonna officially endorse you as a politician. That's one possible
Got it.
thing. The other possible thing is the Czech itself may have issues with some of the metaverse run by certain countries, I assume, because a lot of metaverse is still not like community owned. It's owned by a company. And maybe the NFT is community interoperable, but it's still owned by a company in US or a company in China. And Czech itself might have issue with some of the underlying countries relationship.
Got it.
Those are my
Yeah.
guesses. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think there's a right answer. I was just been curious on why the metaverse, why Somnium Space of, will he actually reach Czech voters? And I think you're right. I think as we think about why this is maybe innovative or even worthwhile to talk about. It's new, it's novel, it is innovative, it is an element of PR for sure. So it may be less about like, let me reach specifically Czech voters, but the fact that it'll get news coverage might bring it into light a little bit more. And then that will reach more as like, hey, this is an innovative candidate. But as we think about maybe not this particular candidate, Janacek, the presidential candidate here, as you think about in the future, I just want to cover maybe just a few thoughts, Elisha, on my own, on why maybe politicians or individuals that are maybe looking to like brand themselves. Maybe it's like a musician, right? If you're an individual artist, maybe it's a politician. Thinking about individuals that are kind of in the public eye and why they might consider the metaverse as a place to partner or to host events and things like that. A few things came to my mind. One is you are being represented as a virtual version of yourself. You have an avatar that's representing you. So it allows you to reach people that may not be there with you physically. So theoretically, right, he could say, hey, Czech people, Czech millennials, on August 1st, I'm going to be in Somnium Space. You can join in the browser, you can join in immersive, and I'm going to be doing a speech, a 1 hour speech or a 30-minute speech, along with a 1 hour meet and greet. And you can come high five me. We're going to have music, we're going to dance, whatever. But the idea of being able to connect with people, if you're a musician or a football player, you're connecting with fans or you're connecting with your um, constituents, right? So it allows you to connect in a way that might feel like you're in person. You get the benefits of being in the same presence as we talked about earlier, but without actually physically having to be there. It also might have opportunities for marketing, right? where now that I have a digital twin or a digital clone of myself, I may be able to leverage that 3D avatar to do things like videos, to promote things. So it allows you to kind of leverage that avatar that's now a version of you into new means and new outputs of marketing and media that people can then consume. Think about Eminem and Snoop Dogg. They are in the music video. Had they had clones of themselves, you might actually see them as avatars to kind of represent themselves and do music videos. We're seeing that in other countries right now, Elisha. I think France is one place where we've seen that, where there are artists that are creating digital versions of themselves as 3D files, and then they themselves are not even in the videos, and they're actually getting full-fledged videos and their music videos. And so there is a benefit as it relates to representing yourself in these in a kind of a virtual world. So just an interesting
I,
thing to consider as interesting news as it relates to the Czech Republic and a presidential
I
candidate,
just
but also as we think about other stuff too.
yeah, I just did some research. Somnium Space team is based in Czech Republic,
Oh, there you go.
and it is run by Arta Sikov and his team of around 5 in-house developers. And there's no plan for
Yep.
Somnium Space to be decentralized. Therefore, the world will always be owned and run by Somnium Space company. So there you go. Makes sense.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a connection there for sure.
yeah.
So anyway, that's the news for today. As we some of the articles and some kind of bigger news as we we've covered a few things today. Some interesting things there around NFTs and metaverse environments and approaches from other executives. Um, Great. So last week during our Fresh showcase, Elisha, I was really excited to see some of the stuff you've been working on. And to keep that tradition alive, today I'm going to be showcasing something that I've been working on that's kind of under this umbrella of the content we cover. A lot of times we educate and we share what we're working on, cover news. But the reality is we actually are builders. We build things and we like to experiment and prototype. And there's going to be a lot more of that in the future as we think about Fresh Labs. It's what we've done historically and what we'll continue to do. I want to showcase one thing that I've been working on that's been a lot of fun. So I've been recently very, very impressed and interested in the concept of a metahuman. A metahuman is the terminology, and it's actually a program that is created by Unreal Engine. It can be viewed over at. Let's see if I can. Probably could have leveraged the URL, but it's metahuman.unrealengine.com. You don't need a powerful PC or Mac to be able to run it on the browser. It does take some processing, obviously graphic cards and things like that, but they handle the processing in the cloud to be able to have you create what's called a metahuman, which is a hyper realistic custom character or avatar. A lot of times we hear the word virtual human. You might have heard of virtual influencers. A lot of them have been created as kind of these avatars. I like to call them digital beings. I think that's the most appropriate one. It's a digital version that's not always virtual. And then being, as in sometimes it's an actual person running it, sometimes it might be an AI that's been connected. But I've been really fascinated by that. And I wanted to go through the process of creating my own custom metahuman, number one. Number two, I wanted to bring that character into Unreal Engine 5, which is a brand new released version of Unreal Engine. It's been a few years, and there's a lot of hyperrealism and stuff that's tied into that. So I wanted to bring it in there. And the third thing is, without having to buy any expensive gear or motion tracking suits and things like that you might see at Planet of the Apes or movies like that are on Hollywood. I wanted to see what the most accessible way was to do some facial motion capture. Like, how can I get this custom created metahuman to move in the same way that my real face moves, right? We see this, we don't necessarily see it to this level of fidelity, right? Metahuman, Unreal Engine 5, motion tracking. That's a really unique little set of technology to be able to make this happen. What we see most is this concept of VTubers, which comes from it's usually YouTubers or live streamers that will represent themselves as avatars, sometimes as themselves, like a digital version of themselves, or as a new person that's not them and they are themselves are anonymous. and they go and create content and they interact with fans and they build followings. So there's actually quite a lot of VTubers. There's quite a lot of virtual influencers. We've talked about that in the past. And so I wanted to get my hands on this technology, Elisha, to say, what does it look like to create something like this? Is this something that I could do, that we could do? And what does that look like? So I'm going to play this
So
video.
to
Oh,
oh,
go
okay,
ahead.
okay, go ahead.
No,
Does
no,
it
go
does it
ahead.
show like a process? Okay. No, no, I was curious. So MetaHuman is Unreal's product of creating the avatar,
Correct.
right? And then do you have to put that into Unreal Engine, or that's like an optional step to?
It's optional. You don't The MetaHuman can be downloaded and it's something you can just leverage and put into different software. There is a connection. There is a way to import. It's a little bit of a roundabout process, but what I like about it is that MetaHumans come pre-rigged. They're in T-shaped pose, which means that you can then move them around if you did want to do motion tracking. And all of their face has all these different points of movement, and you can see that in this video. So if
Okay.
I click play on this, this is a
Mm.
custom character. I went and created this using MetaHuman. I went and picked the hair and the freckles and the eyebrows and the eye color and how big the cheeks are. There was about 100 points of interest that I can move around and play with. And then here at the bottom, you can say, okay, let's see what this rigged character looks like. Let's show surprise. Let's show happy. And this is all within MetaHuman. What it would look like when it's happy. Let's have him look around. Let's have him look at the face. So you can see all the different things that are available as you kind of work with MetaHuman. And so by the end of this, I said, okay, great. I've created my virtual human. Now let me bring that into Unreal Engine and let me leverage the Live Link. It's a proprietary Unreal Engine iOS app. They have it on Android as well. And I went and rigged this up. The process probably took about 10 hours of time, Elisha. So it's quite a lot of time to kind of figure out how this all works and how it all connects and get the face rigged. But the demo I want to show today is that I've then taken that, and you can see me on the top right. Here I am with my iPad, and it's tracking my face, and I'm doing a live control, a facial motion capture, uh, and I'm controlling this hyper realistic metahuman. Right now, as you can tell, I'm not moving my hands. I'm moving my hands in video, but my metahuman is not moving. But you can see a real time connection between facial motion tracking with an iPad, not an expensive motion tracking suit or whatever, some hyper, Hollywood camera. And you can see what that looks like as you go in and bring that into
Wow.
Unreal
Is
Engine
it
5.
the Unreal Engine 5 rendering that I'm looking at on the middle part?
You're looking at a medium level quality, not
Okay.
high, ultra, or I think there's even epic. You're seeing a mid level quality metahuman that gets way more hyper realistic, as you saw earlier. As I was kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
zooming
yeah.
in on some of that, you could see that it was like very,
Mhm.
very hyper realistic. But that has been brought into Unreal Engine, and yeah, that's the essentially the character that was created, that I created and then can then control. And I had to do some calibration and train where my eyebrows and eyes and nose and expressions and to what extent I can accentuate them. I can say, hey, when I smile, I want it to smile this way or this big. Or when I'm angry, I want you to accentuate it to be even more angry than what I really am. And so it could really exaggerate emotions. Um, so this is an example of that. I did create a version of myself. I wasn't quite ready to show that, but this is one that I created that was just custom. I didn't want to do the physics of the hair as I'm moving around. Right, hair is going to move around, and there's a lot of
Mm.
processing tied with hair, and so I wanted to make this one bald.
Oh,
And
that's
so
cool.
I went and
Can
created it
you
without some hair. What's
can you
that?
throw settings at it? Like, okay, I'm in the rain, so that like water is gonna drop on my face and stuff like that.
100%. Yeah, I could do rain. I could do shadows. I can actually create. Um, I can have a what's called a switchboard. Like I could have something like a stream deck in front of me, and I can change the position of the camera, change the web, have something appear, something exit, and I could be doing a live motion tracking to react to the thing that's happening. Oh, I'm happy. Like if I'm on a live stream on Twitch or YouTube and somebody says something negative, I could hit a button that starts rain and I can be like, oh no, you unsubscribed, right? So you might trigger hyper realism in these avatars. So
You did
this was the
all
showcase
this
for
on
today.
mhm.
Oh, go ahead.
You did all this on Mac?
I did this using I could have done this on a Mac. This is available on a Mac. I actually did this on my personal PC.
Got it.
This is kind of something I've been more interested on the personal side, not necessarily something that we're doing for Fresh Labs per se, but something I've been really interested in personally. But it does fall under this umbrella of the metaverse and XR and how we represent ourselves in these virtual spaces. And so I wanted to get a sense for some of that through very, very like up to date modern technology and software to kind of get this working. So I think the next steps for me would be things like, instead of having a white background, can I put this person in an environment? Can I also bring in the hair physics? Can I bring in the switchboard to change the camera position? Can I actually bring in something like a leap motion tracker and actually track the hands now, not just the head? Does that make sense? And so there's quite a lot that can still be done.
Yeah.
So
So it looks
yeah, I
like
mean, what
it's
are your thoughts on this? I
still
know we're a little over time, but I'm
gated
curious on
us.
your thoughts.
But yeah, I want to sign up and get access, or you can help me create my digital version, and then we can start using that during the live show or when we join meetings. That would be kind of cool.
That is an absolutely a use case, is that we could run our live show as our digital versions in a hyper realistic space. We could also take Zoom calls and Google Meet calls. All of that is possible, especially when you use something like OBS. You can go and specify a frame and say, make this a virtual camera. And so then instead of selecting your camera, you're selecting this virtual camera. And now you're doing a real time tracking. It's what you see a lot of these virtual influencers do when they're doing live calls or live streaming, or they're on Omegle or whatever it is. They're kind of leveraging that kind of process. All right. Well, it's exciting. There's going to be more to come on some of this, as well as some of the other stuff that we covered, Elisha, last week, and some other showcase as we continue to kind of progress on some of these experiments and prototypes that we build. But thank you for all those that joined. And for those that will be watching in the future, a reminder: every Wednesday at noon Pacific time, we run the Fresh Labs live show. Next week will be a little bit unique because we'll be together. Um, but feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Join us on the LinkedIn showcase page, as we talked about earlier, which is Fresh Labs, or join us on our social media accounts here at the bottom. Metaverse Johnny on TikTok for me, or Try Johnny, and then Elisha Terada for all of your social media, which is so convenient. And with that, we will close.
Thank you so much for joining. See you next week.